I'm going to get started with some of our preliminaries. We do have about, 100 people in line for voting things, so I won't get started with any voting until they're in here. In terms of the voting, I just want to mention, if you're a voter, you should have the handy-dandy handset. You'll see it has a colored dot on it. If you are in this room, the main auditorium, your voting handset should have a red, green, or yellow dot. If you are in the gym, your handset should have a dark or light blue spot. If you're in here with a dark blue or light blue spot, your vote won't be counted. So you should either go get a new voting thing or you should move to the gym. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is read the return of the warrant. Hereof fail not, and make due return of this warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk at the time and place of meeting and election aforesaid given our hands this 23rd day of August in the year 2023, signed by 4 members of the Select Board, Don Hill Holgate, Brooke Moore, Matt Fee, Tom Dixon. Select Board of Nantucket, Mass, pursuant to Chapter 39, Section 10 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth and the warrant adopted August 23, 2023, have notified and warned the inhabitants of the Town of Nantucket qualified to vote in town affairs to appear at the times and place, and for the purposes within mentioned by posting said notification on September 14, 2023, at the Stop and Shop on Pleasant Street, the Town and County Building at 16 Broad Street, and upon the bulletin boards at the corner of Main and Federal Streets and Syosconset Square. Sworn to under pains and penalties of perjury, Constable Jerry W. Adams. Okay. So we'll start, as we always do, with a special, just with a Pledge of the Allegiance. Our flag is over here. So you will need to stand. I'm sorry to make you do that. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. I want to mention my assistant moderator, who is currently in the gym standing by, Shanta Blas Murphy. Also, in the event that I have to step aside here, Lee Saperstein is here and ready to fill in. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank Chief William Pittman for his 19 years of service. Chief Pittman is down here in the front. He finishes November 30th. Thank you. We do have, because this is a special town meeting, unlike the annual, we do have 4 articles with quorum requirements. Articles 9 and 12 have a 3% quorum requirement. Articles 10 and 11 have a 5% quorum requirement. As of the voter registration deadline on October 27, 2023, we had 9,685 voters. According to the town clerk, 3% is 291, 5% is 484. My last check had us at 518, so we do have that quorum. We have 2 non-voters, and I'm asking for your unanimous consent to allow to speak tonight. First, under the charter, the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers is entitled to have a representative speak at the meeting, and Kathy Baird is here. And Karen Zagaiko, did I get that right? Was a member of the short-term rental work group, and she is here as well. Okay, so as we do at the beginning of the meeting, we're just going to adopt Nantucket traditions and procedures as a supplemental guide for running the meeting. I will have, just as a preview, a bunch of changes coming to that to update it for hopefully for the annual. I had a voter who was very kind to go through it and send me a whole bunch of comments, so I've got to work through those and make some changes, so be prepared for that. You know, we go with positive motions here, which means that when you're voting on something, a yes vote will adopt whatever the motion is, and a no vote will defeat that motion. So we try, every once in a while, we can't get around it, but we try not to have negative motions. If you have a question or think things have gone off the rails, please stand up and raise a point of order. That's the appropriate way to do that. Please remember the decorum is really important. It slows things down when people are cross-talking and getting into arguments and not following, clapping, cheering, booing, all the hissing, all those really horrible things that we don't need to do. Please make sure that your cell phones are silenced. If you're looking to be recognized in the auditorium, please no hats. And I think we'll just do a quick test vote just to make sure everyone understands how the voting things work. So these things have a lot of buttons on them, but the only ones you need to really worry about are 1 is yes, 2 is no, and then send. And you'll see in the little screen what you've done and that it's been sent. And during the time, the little green light goes on during the time the voting is open. Yep, there it is. You can change your vote during that. And how many seconds are we doing? 30. We start with 30. If it seems amazingly short or long, then we'll adjust, but we'll start with 30 seconds. So what happens is when I announce that we're ready to vote, I'll say voting is open, 1 for yes and 2 for no, and then we wait 30 seconds, the light goes off, and we announce the vote. So just as a sample question, here's my question for you. Will anything that's said here tonight change the way that you're going to vote on any of the warrant articles? Voting is open. It's 1 for yes, 2 for no. So you hit the number, and it says that your vote's been received. On this one. Okay. Okay, so kind of split. Yes, 258, no, 274. The noes have it if it's a majority. Okay, so we do have just a few corrections to a couple of the Finance Committee motions. There are 3. I'm going to read those in right now. The first is Article 7. starts on page 18. The motion is on page 19. And we're eliminating subparagraph B, the raise and appropriate language, so that it will go right from maybe amended or incorporated into an easement plan, and then B will become authorize the select board to enter into all agreements and take any and all actions as may be necessary or appropriate to effectuate the foregoing purposes. And that is what is shown on the screen. That's 7. And so when we vote on these 3 articles, we'll be voting on the motions with these corrections made. Article 12. Article 12, the Finance Committee motion that's in the booklet on page 23 says that the motion will be provided at the meeting, and so here it is. Finance Committee motion moved to appropriate the sum of $3,200,000 to be spent by the town manager with the approval of the select board for the purpose of supplemental funding for the construction of town employee housing located at town-owned property located at Fairgrounds Road / Waite Drive, including the costs of professional services for design, permitting, engineering, construction supervision, materials, and other related professional services, and any other costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the sum is transferred from free cash. That is 12. And then on 13, the motion was to be provided at town meeting on page 23, and that is motion to take no action. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to run through and call the articles. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with this, it's kind of our version of a consent agenda. And this is how it works. Any voter can call an article. You don't have to be a sponsor. You don't have to have signed on. You don't have to work for the town or anything. Anybody can call an article. If you want to discuss the article, if you don't agree with the recommendation of either the Finance Committee or the Planning Board, as the case may be, and you want to do something different, then you should call the article. If, on the other hand, you're in agreement with that recommendation, don't call the article. We'll vote everything in accordance with the motions that are printed in the warrant with those technical amendments and additions that I just read in. Does anyone have a question about that? Okay. And I'll go through once, and then I'll go through a second time just to make sure that I captured everything and that no one had second thoughts or wasn't paying attention or something. Okay. So, 1, 2, what? Can I have your name? Mary Lepre, 1. 2. Okay, thank you, Mary. 3. 4. Yes. 5. 6. 7. Yes? Mr. Glidden? That's Toby Glidden, or Tobias Glidden, excuse me. 8. 9. 10. Yes. Mr. Brown, 9. 10. Matthew Beal. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19? Are you in favor of 19? Then don't call it. Okay. And, okay, so 19 is, has a positive recommendation. So if you're against 19, you should call it. 19 is the Sankaty Road sewer extension. Yes. You have questions? Okay, so. All right, fine. Yes. Are you prepared to bring a positive motion because 18 has a negative recommendation? Right? Okay. Okay, and 20. Could I get your name? Campbell Sutton. Okay, so here's what we have. 1, Ms. Lepre. 2, Ms. Lepre. 3, not called. 4, Ms. Lepre. 5, not called. 6, not called. 7, Tobias Glidden. 8, not called. 9, Toby Brown. 10, Matthew Beal. 11, not called. 12, not called. 13, not called. 14, not called. 15, not called. 16, not called. 17, not called. 18, not called. 19, Ms. Lepre, and 20, Ms. Sutton. So we will be discussing 1, 2, 4, 7, 9, 10, 19, and 20. Okay. So our first order of business is going to be to vote on the uncalled articles. Now, just so you know, because a couple of the articles in this grouping require a 2/3 vote, such as Article 5 and Article 6, this motion, unless we have to break it up, is going to require a 2/3 vote. So this is the motion. Move that the following articles be voted as recommended and/or amended by the Finance Committee or as recommended and/or amended by the Planning Board as printed in the Finance Committee report with amendments brought forward during the course of the meeting. 3, 5, 6, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Recognize the chair of the Finance Committee for the purpose of making that motion. Thank you. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Ready to go. Voting is now open. 1 for yes, no for 2. So while we're waiting, I'll just mention that down at the table in the front, starting from my right, your left, it's the town clerk's office, Laura Ramo and Nancy Holmes, the town manager, Libby Gibson, John Giorgio, town council. Then we have the 5 members of the select board, Brooke Moore, Don Hill-Hogate, Matt Fee, Tom Dixon, and Malcolm McNabb. Then we have the finance committee, at least the chair and vice chair, Stephen Morey and Denise Cronow is the chair. And then we have the chair and vice chair of the planning board, Dave Iverson and Joe Topham. The other members of those committees are down in the front row in case we need them, but we can't squeeze everyone in, so that's the compromise. So on that vote, yes, 595, no, 66. That motion is adopted by 2/3. Now I'm going to recognize Denise Cronow, Chair of the Finance Committee, for making a motion to move Articles 9 and 10 to the front of the meeting. Okay, do you want to explain? Is there a second, first of all?
Second.
Yeah, motion is made and seconded. And if you want to explain why we're doing that.
We're doing that because we need the quorum. We need 3% of the registered voters. And sometimes, not often, but not everybody stays for the entire meeting, particularly after the more exciting articles. So we want to get the appropriation articles out of the way, and then we'll move on to Article 1 and 2.
Okay, and that is a 3% quorum for Article 9 and a 5% quorum for Article 10, which we currently have. So is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, so this requires a majority vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion and we'll move right to a discussion of Article 9. A no vote will defeat that motion. And voting is open. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Okay, on that motion, 609 yes, no 110. That motion is adopted. Okay, Article 9. Article 9 appears on page 21 of the warrant. The motion is moved that the sum of $1 million is transferred from the annual operating budget under Article 8 of the 2022 annual town meeting from the stated purpose of a, quote, pilot program to help ease housing expenses for town employees to the new purpose of, quote, acquiring town employee housing, including all costs incidental thereto. Hey, Mary, can you add a close quote after employees? There you go, right there. Close quote, yeah. Perfect, okay. Is that your motion, Ms. Cronow?
Moderator.
Thank you, is there a second? Okay. Mr. Brown, you called this, so if you could come up. I should have mentioned, we have 4 standing microphones, so when you want to speak, you come to one of them. There's one there, one here, and one here.
Thank you. Wish I would have known this was first. I would have called Article 12 instead. It's a lot more money. I just wanted a quick question. If this money was not did not pass today, where would the money go? Because obviously, if we have to vote on it, it's not an automatic thing. I'm just curious where the money would go. We said no on this.
If we didn't vote for it, it would go into free cash.
Okay. So, all right, well, so I still would say I'm against this just because it seems like we're just constantly, our taxes just keep going through all this, pilot programs, this, that. I'm not really seeing a lot of results. I'm assuming maybe that's why we keep hiring people from off island instead of grabbing the one from here, because we keep trying to build more instead of, So anyways, it's only $1 million on a big budget, but I'm just saying let's vote no, because there's a lot of these spending articles coming up. So, hey, let's save a little bit of money this year. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Turbot? And Mr. Turbot, maybe you should say who you are when you speak, just so that people know. The first time. You don't have to do it every time.
Just the first time?
Yeah.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Just to kind of give everybody an understanding, we made this decision to try to transfer this rather than go to free cash to not have to exercise any of the previously authorized borrowing articles for affordable housing and housing. So this actually is not adding to the tax rate. It's actually using something that would go into free cash a year from now to try to not have to exercise any of the borrowing articles that we already have authorization to use in a way to try to help mitigate the increase in the tax rate. So that's why we propose to fund it this way.
Thank you. Anyone else on Article 9? Okay, then seeing none, this requires a majority vote. A yes vote will adopt the Finance Committee's motion. A no vote will defeat that motion. I'm ready to. Voting's open. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Okay, on Article 9, yes, 651, no, 178. That motion is adopted. Okay, Article 10. Article 10 is on page 22. I'm going to ask for your consent to waive the reading of that motion. It's as printed in the warrant on page 22. Ms. Curnow, is that your motion?
So move, Madam Moderator.
Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Okay, Mr. Beal, you called this. Oh, and I just want to mention that this article requires a 2/3 vote. Okay.
Am I good to talk?
Yes,
It's
go ahead.
Mr. Peel, just for the record.
Oh, Peel, I'm sorry.
Like an orange.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. My motivation in calling this is fairly simple. I'm all, as a parent, father, and kids growing up here, I'm all for renovating the fields over there. I'm just worried about, and I want to keep a strong tab on our PFAS problem here. And I just want to get some reassurance from the town that this article does not include any, when it comes to renovation, additions of turf fields at the Belvedere playing fields. So I know it says grass fields in there, but there's a little vague on the renovation part as far as putting in a new field or anything like that, or replacing current grass with turf. That's, I think we're all aware of the PFAS problem. I just want to make sure that we're keeping up on that and not adding to the problem as well.
Thank you. Did you want to be recognized? Yes.
Hi, Charlie Palaki, the Parks and Rec Manager. There's no new synthetic turf or any renovations to the turf field that's there. This is all natural grass. The addition of one new natural grass field, and been doing some work to improve the 2 existing fields.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Michael Kozort, 4 Sparrow. I sat at the last meeting last year, and I was amazed, as I'm sure everybody else was, at the total number of expenditures approved that night. What I did not expect was that the one article to go down was the fields, something for our children. And some people questioned the town's maintenance of the fields, of the existing fields. And I would concede at the time, in the past, that was maybe the case. However, since adding our manager of Parks and Rec, that's changed significantly. And furthermore, first of all, I would urge anybody to go out and look at the fields because they're in great shape right now. And I urge you to pass this article. More to the point is the extreme need for playing fields. We all know that how quickly Nantucket has grown. We consequently have more children playing more sports than ever before. Last year, the youth lacrosse had approximately 150 participants. Soccer had 450, and adult soccer over 100. So undoubtedly, there will be more next year. This places a heavy burden on our grass fields and creates a challenge to find field space. It's very clear to anybody involved in our youth in the community. And let's not forget the impact the pandemic has had on our children. They need greater access to playing spaces. If we don't create those spaces, where might they turn? To what might they devote their time? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, up in the back.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nikki Drew. I'm on the Commission of the Parks and Rec, but I'd like to speak as just a citizen. And I don't have any children here, but I just know as my job, I'm a personal trainer, and I want to see young athletes come up. And just looking at what Charlie has done with the Parks and Rec and everything that's happened just in the last 8 months, it's quite amazing. And I would urge people to vote yes on this. We definitely need more sports-orientated things happening here. And especially with kids coming out of school and not necessarily going to college, maybe staying here and doing the trades. They need something to do. And I'm talking not just the younger kids, but also like men's soccer leagues. You know, when I first came here back in the early 90s, we had great soccer contests between all different kinds of businesses, and I would love to see that happen again. You know, we need more community stuff to happen. So anyway, that's my 2 pence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drew. Okay, so I think we can go to a vote on Article 10. It does require a 2/3 vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion made by the Finance Committee. A no vote will defeat that motion. Voting is open, 1 for yes, 2 for no. You don't get the vote, calculate the 2/3, right? I have to do that? Oh, you're going to do it? We can do it. Would you? Sure. Because my math skills. Okay. You can do the math on that. Article 1. I hope anyone who came didn't think we'd already gone by it. So Article 1, okay. Keep your wits about you for this one. So Article 1 is quite long. I am going to ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading of Article 1. Where does it start? Okay, it starts on page 7, continues to page 8 and page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and ends on page 14. I'm going to recognize Ms. Curnow for the purpose of making the Finance Committee's motion.
So moved, Madam Moderator.
Okay, now this was called by you, Ms. Lepre, so I'm going to let you go.
So a few weeks ago, the Board of Health met to discuss its positions on Articles 1 and 2 because implementing and enforcing the regulations would fall on the Health Director and the Board of Health. The vote was tied 2-2 on whether to recommend these articles to the voters. I regret not being at the meeting as a member of the Board of Health. I was on a flight to Seattle to visit some friends, and it was a trip that I had rescheduled because of COVID. It was my first time away from my children in over 2 years. If I had been at the meeting, I would have voted against Articles 1 and 2, and the Board of Health would be making a official statement today to ask you to defeat Articles 1 and 2. I have my own reasons for not supporting the work group's articles. I think they pave the way for commercial and corporate STR investors to continue to buy houses in our neighborhoods. Madam Moderator, since most of us didn't attend the Board of Health meeting where these articles were discussed, through you, I'd like to ask the Health Director whether enforcement would be different for the 2 versions of Article 1 that are in front of us. Thank you.
Mr. Santamaria.
Good evening, Madam Moderator and the members of town meeting. I'm Roberto Santamaria, the Director of the Health and Human Services Department. Yes, the discussion was held at the Board of Health meeting for August of 2023. The reason we held it at the Board of Health meeting after the short-term rental work group had already met was because we had asked for a joint meeting back in June 8th when I attended a short-term rental work group meeting with the planning board, and I specifically asked for a joint meeting. That request was never actually honored. So we held an independent meeting of the Board of Health where I expressed my concerns at that meeting. In that meeting, I was quoted as saying that the entire Article 1 is unenforceable, which is not true. Article 1 was the same thing as Article 39 from last annual town meeting. It's already in place. All of that is enforceable, and we're already working on it. What I have an issue with, what I expressed as our issue is that we have a problem with sections H, M, and L. M oversees things about 4 weeks turnovers, a maximum of 4 turnovers. L has, M is also, L and M, sorry, my notes here. Here's my pitch to everyone, practice your own penmanship. I can't read my own handwriting. So L and M are the turnover discussions. There was no software. We met with 3 separate software companies that are able to track turnovers. However, what they are able to track is days rented, overall days rented. So what I would suggest, and what our suggestion was at the Board of Health meeting also, would be that we can change the wording like that from 4 weeks to something like 30 days in those 2 months, or 25 days. And from 9 weeks to something like 60 days. That is something we can enforce. The other issue is the property transfer, where we mentioned bequeathing. That is something that people will have to self-report to us. That's something that we, as a health department, are going to have trouble enforcing. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
I will stand over there for more.
And please identify yourself for the record.
I'll take off my mask. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I read Article 1 thoroughly and still found it very confusing. I don't see how either version is going to keep commercial investment-only STRs away. All these rules are making it more complicated for locals to rent their homes. The rules should be easier for locals to rent their homes, not harder. I have been renting my home every summer for 35 years. I've seen the changes. Even though there are more people coming to Nantucket, it's become harder to rent because locals have to compete with sophisticated investors who are operating mini hotels in our neighborhoods. Article 1 would allow all existing commercial and corporate STRs to continue to operate forever. And if you read it carefully, you see how it won't stop the new ones. These STR businesses have marketing budgets and pricing software. If we make it easy for them, we're going to be gobbled up. I'm already feeling it, and I hope anyone considering renting here understands voting for this will make it harder for us. Vote this down, and then vote down Article 2, and let's go back to the drawing board. Don't vote for something you're unsure of. This is way too important for so many locals. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Kathy Baird, and I'm here as the designated non-voting taxpayer. And I want to speak just a little bit on behalf of the short-term rental work group on the issue that the Board of Health brought up, as we had discussed this, and I thought it would be a good time to speak. First, we were completely unaware that there was a request for a joint meeting, so that's really unfortunate. It did not happen. And I just worked with, I was asked by Finance Director Brian Turbett to be part of a team that helped us select the new vendor for the registry. And part of the reasons that we chose the vendor we did was because they weren't just offering software, they were also offering services to help with enforcement. They have a partner called Rent Responsibly who would be doing a lot of the videos for how to use the system, the frequently asked questions, to support both the short-term rental operators as well as the town. They have analytics and all of that as well. And it was never the intent for the town to be tracking changes of occupancy real time. I certainly don't want AI figuring out who's coming and going from my house. But the idea was that on an annual basis, the intent was when the requirement to submit your rental history was posted into the registry, it would come from a source which could then be verified. So it would just happen once a year and on renewal, not in a real-time mode. And we took that language from one of the other towns that has successfully implemented short-term rentals regulations. And the main reason was that it gives flexibility. If you put a day count in there, that's a lot different than changing. We're trying to control the churn, which is the changes of occupancy, and we felt that was a better way to go. Thank you for letting me talk, and the short-term rental work group appreciates your support.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Lauren O'Donnell. I just had a question. What is the definition of a short-term rental?
Okay, it will be, there's a definition in the motion, which we'll hopefully get to. Should be under, there we go, there it is. A dwelling unit or portions thereof that is not a transient residential facility where at least one room or dwelling unit is rented to an occupant or sub-occupant, and 2, all accommodations are reserved in advance. Rental periods with a change in occupancy in excess of 31 calendar days shall not be considered a short-term rental. The rental of property for a total of 14 days or less in any calendar year shall not be considered a short-term rental.
I guess I'm wondering, is it weekly or daily? You know, is it like, can somebody do a short-term rental for a weekend?
If
Or
you
does it
rented
need
for a
week?
weekend, that would be a short-term rental.
Okay.
If you rented for more than 14 days in any year. You could rent for 1 or 2 weekends, maybe.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fee, you had an amendment that you wanted to make?
I've been struggling to figure out how to work this mic.
Oh, okay.
I think I've got it. No, thank you. No, what I'd like to do is I would like to return back to the select board version, which is on page 1 to 7 in your in the warrant, and I'll try to keep my comments short. Basically, the short-term rental group, they did a lot of good work, and I agree that Roberto has some issues and some things to worry about, but I think that we can work through them. I think it's 95% there, and I think a lot of it will be administrative. And so I would not want to see us, put this off to the spring and do it again. I think that but there are two differences in the select board. The first difference is that it does not require the two to be linked. We remove the linkage. And what that means is we can vote for number 1, which I believe we should do if it doesn't get weakened. If we accept the select board version, I think we should vote for number 1, and I think we should vote down 2. So we would be allowed to do that. If we don't remove the linkage, then if either of them fails, they both fail, and we're back here in the spring doing it. So that's the first thing it does. The second change that it would do, accepting the first article, is it would define the pre-existing as those who prove they had rented and paid taxes to the state, rather than all dwellings that have a CO. I think it's really important that we define it that way. Number 1 is I think there's an unintended consequence. There's a lot of dwellings that don't have COs. So they wouldn't, the way it's written right now, those dwellings would be out of luck. And our house doesn't have a CO, and a couple other of my houses don't. We don't short-term rent, but just an example. I bet if I asked for a show of hands, we'd have a fair number here. So that's number 1. Number 2 is doing it that way is better from an administrative and an application process issue, rather than having to double check at the building department and see whether it had a CO and see whether it had a CO that date, et cetera. It would all be able to be done through the Board of Health, and I think that's what makes a lot more sense. I sort of look at this and I say, don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. We've been at this for a while, and I would like us to support the select board version and get that through. So please vote for our version. Please don't weaken it. If it gets weakened by a bunch of stuff coming up, then vote against it and vote against 2. But hopefully it won't be weakened too much, and we can move on from this. Thank you. And I tried to do that quickly in case I have to answer questions later. Thank you.
You did a good job. On Mr. Fee's amendment.
Peter Schaefer. And Matt's trying very hard to make this work, and I commend him for that. However, he's punishing people who have not rented, who maybe have lived here for 35 years, own a house, and have never rented. But their child might take over the house and need to rent to pay the bills. Matt is prohibiting that. So he's only allowing people who have previously rented to continue to rent under the 9 rentals per season. So I just don't think that's right. The second thing is the linkage. I'm in favor of the linkage because I think to put onerous restrictions on people and not to codify the fact that they can rent is wrong. So I really do think you should leave it the way it is and vote yes for 1 and 2.
Okay. Up at that back, Mike.
Christy White, I basically agree with the person who just spoke, and I was going to pose it more as a question because I too am very confused about this. When you read it, it's unintelligible to me, and I've read it many times. If we vote on this the way it is, are we saying that any resident of this island, which I am, a full-time resident, I'm privileged enough not to have had to rent my property, but if some year comes along and I want to rent my property, I don't understand why you would penalize me, a resident, and limit how often I can rent my property. I thought the goal here was to, or at least from my perspective, was to prevent some of these commercial owners that are coming in. They've never lived here. They come in, they rent the property the entire year or as much as they can. That's a problem. But residents who've lived on this island for many, many years, decades, telling them that just because they haven't rented before, we're now going to limit what they can do if they find themselves in a financial situation or whatever situation where they want to rent, that they're out of luck because they didn't do it before.
Thank you. Mr. Peel?
Thank you. Matthew Peel. I stood up here at last town meeting and expressed my concern for the short-term rental committee. And I hope everybody sees why. And my views on this issue have changed, quite a bit since our last town meeting. I think the market, the overpricing of the rentals, I think this problem eventually is just going to take care of itself because it's not a sustainable market right now with the pricing and the overabundance of the rentals. And I truly believe it'll collapse sooner or later. But until it does, I think we have the bigger problem I see in this issue is during the feedback sessions, nothing in this article addresses the main concerns that were put through to the board in these feedback sections, which was the noise problem, the too many cars problem, the nuisance of short-term rentals, the overcrowding. And, I think Mr. Fee is onto something. I think he's headed in a good direction. But this, number 2 is absolutely no for me. One thing they're not telling you is the state's going to eventually rule on, this very soon. And if we lock in accessory use, then it's, everybody can short-term rent then. I would say vote down both of these. I think Mr. Fee's onto something. I don't want to push it out till next town meeting, but I think that there needs to be more to this. I think that there needs to be a finance package behind this. I think we need to put forth a little bit better thought. This board was loaded from the beginning in a biased way. And so it's unfortunate what came out of this.
Thank you. On Mr. Fee's amendment, are you the woman from the gym? Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lauren Klein. I'm a year-round resident, and I'm responding to Mr. Fee's amendment to ask a question, and that is, my understanding is that the only really good reason to restrict our own property rights is to do it before a court comes along and restricts it for us in a way that is harsher than what we would choose ourselves. Voting down, unless I'm wrong, voting down Article 2 removes that benefit of precluding courts from restricting our rights further than we might do ourselves. Am I correct in that?
Mr. Giorgio, do you want to?
Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, I was a little bit confused by your question because you are debating Mr. Fee's amendment to Article 1. I think your question pertains, however, to Article 2.
It does.
So the purpose of Article 2 is to provide legal protection to residents who want to rent their homes on a short-term rental basis. It is linked, Article 2 to both the passage of Article 1, so there'll be a set of regulations in place that you must comply with in order to obtain the benefit of the zoning change. If Article 2 is voted down, then we are back where we started, and this issue will likely be decided by the courts. There are 3 currently pending cases where individuals are challenging the various types of short-term rental operations. The one that's most advanced is one that essentially is saying, this looks stupid, so I'll take it off, is essentially saying that a short-term rental, even by a resident, is a commercial use and therefore not allowed in any zoning districts where there are, where residential uses are permitted. So again, if Article 2 is voted down, we would have to wait and see what the courts say, and I'm not in the business of predicting what a court might do here, but I will tell you that if there were to be an adverse ruling by a court, we would certainly have the ability to, that is the town, to appeal that decision and take it up to the appellate level. So there would be time to react if Article 2 is not passed, and then a court somehow invalidates short-term rentals because he or she determines it's a commercial use.
Yes, we would be able to appeal, but we would not be able to have a town meeting that set a new Article 2 into place, right? We would be stuck with whatever the court, and then eventually the appeals court, decided was legal under our current zoning.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with that characterization.
Okay.
You can call a special town meeting within a very short period of time. The warrant only has to be posted for 14 days. And so if there was an adverse ruling from the court, you could certainly come back to another special town meeting or deal with it in the spring to address the zoning piece, which is what Article 2 does.
And overrule the court, essentially, by the town adopting new zoning regs?
Well, I don't want to get into too much detail here because this is a pending case, but if town meeting passes Article 2, that's a legislative act, and the town has determined to allow short-term rentals as a primary use. And so it wouldn't overrule the court, but it could very well make any decision by the court or the pending litigation moot.
No, I completely understand that. I'm a litigator myself. What I'm saying is that if we voted down Article 2 and then a court rules, what are our options? Are we still allowed as a town to change the zoning regs so that we say short-term rentals are allowed if the court decides for us, as it did in Linfield, that short-term rentals are not allowed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I think we have to get back to Mr. Fee's motion. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you,
Thank
Ms. Klein. Okay, Mr. DaCosta.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Bob DaCosta. I'm going to speak on Matt's amendment.
Thank you.
I'm adamantly against it for the sheer fact that I've never rented my house. I built my house 30 years ago. I worked my butt off to pay for that house, and if I want to rent that house, I'm not going to have him tell me that I can't.
Thank you. Okay, so let me go over here to Mr. Sulzer.
Jim Sulzer, a former member of the Short-Term Rental Work Group. In responding to Mr. Fee's amendment, I must say in passing that we strongly urge the passage of both articles. We know that Article 2 faces a stiff challenge, as it will require a 2/3 vote to pass. I'd like to address just one aspect of Mr. Fee's amendment. I support the Select Board's one-way linking of the 2 articles. This allows Article 1 to stand alone and pass by a majority vote, even if Article 2 cannot muster that 2/3 vote. The regulations in Article 1 are a direct reflection of the values that guided our short-term rental work group, from respecting the tradition of home rental on Nantucket to reducing the churn of frequent summer turnovers. We've done our very best to find a sustainable balance, supporting existing property rights while trying to preserve the quality of life on our island. We all recognize that the integrity of neighborhoods is threatened by investor-only STRs and corporate STRs. Thus, Article 1 bans new corporate STRs, they're at less than 4% right now, and it discourages investor-only STRs by limiting new STRs to just 4 contracts in high season. We think these Article 1 regulations are a big step in the right direction and are very important. It's crucial to ensure that Article 1 passes and is put in place. I ask you to support any amendment that will allow one-way linkage between the 2 articles. It's a first step toward taking control of our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton?
Good evening. Wait a minute, I'm supposed to be 2/5 away from there. Point of clarification, so the amendment, as Mr. Fee has put forward, is to de-link the 2 articles and to strike out...
Go to the other thing he's doing.
Oh, I thought he said to get...
Yeah, there you go. He's striking out certificate of occupancy and adding back in the submission of proof that you've rented in at least 1 calendar third quarter between 2019 and today.
Okay, I have one question, which, before I make a statement, and I don't know if you can answer it. My assumption was that there would be a process through which someone such as Mr. DaCosta or another woman who spoke, or myself even, could apply newly, after this is passed, after we have regulations, if we wanted to short-term rent. Is that true, or is there no process for new applications? Did you?
I heard your question.
Okay.
Mr. Giorgio?
Yes, Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker. If Mr. Fee's amendment passes, it will mean that you would have to have a history of renting in order to be able to do the 9 changes in occupancy during July and August. However, if you never rented your house before, or you sell your house, it would be reduced to 4 changes in occupancy. So it's not quite accurate to say that you wouldn't be able to rent in the future, but it would be on a more limited basis than if you had rented in the past.
Okay, so I just want to clarify this because I think it's very confusing for people. The four contracts or weeks or days, however they end up doing it, versus the 9, only affects July and August. It does not affect any other time during the year. So if you happen to rent short-term in the shoulder seasons, this is not going to stop you from doing that. It doesn't limit the number of contracts. We know in May and June, it's very busy time for weddings, let's say. So you can, and with shorter contracts, so this does not affect that. And if I were to, or Mr. DaCosta were to want to newly apply, we would still be able to rent, just our number of contracts for July and August would be fewer. So I just wanted to clarify that. I really hope that I support Matt's delinking for 2 reasons. One, I voted for Article 60 because I really felt we needed a baseline. We need to have something in place to begin the regulating the short-term rentals. We need something. We have exactly nothing or a very short something now. And I think it's crucial that we have something. We pass this, and you want to make an amendment to it. in May, I believe it is, May 7th is the next annual town meeting, and this can be amended to change parts of it that, as Matt said, are administrative or are, complications or loopholes or what have you. But if we don't have this in place, then we have nothing. And there's a very good chance that come spring, we won't have any more than we had last spring. So I really would encourage people to support Matt's delinking.
Thank you.
Vote in favor of Article 1 and against Article 2. And if they're linked together, then it has to be a no across the board. Article 2 creates unintended consequences
thank
with
you.
the number of zoning areas it allows.
Thank you. Ms. Duez?
Good afternoon. My name is Ann Duez. I live on Mill Street. In the first Select Board-sponsored STR information session on Thursday, October 5th, the short-term rental work group member, or maybe I should say former, John Kitchener said, and I quote, "I just want to make it clear that 5 of the 8 former STRWG members all agree that the Select Board version is better than the version that we presented to them." I agree with Mr. Kitchener. The Select Board and the short-term rental work group negotiated constructively to achieve an outcome that they could both live with. Then, when the Finance Committee did its review, they changed the article that these 2 groups had worked hard to come together on. I strongly support Matt Fee's motion to adopt the Select Board version of Article 1. Voters should be able to vote separately on the general bylaw and the zoning bylaw. We already have an STR bylaw that was passed without any changes to the zoning code. Article 1 is simply an amendment of this bylaw. It's perfectly reasonable for a voter to be in favor of building on this foundation to regulate short-term rentals, but not like an open-ended permissive zoning bylaw. Why shouldn't we be free to amend that bylaw with no strings attached? If the 2 are linked back and forth, as they are in the FinCom recommended article, it's all or nothing. That is too extreme, and voters should not stand for having their feet held to the fire like this and having their choice limited. Please vote yes for Matt's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Raisman?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Georgia Raisman. I live in Sconset. I do not short-term or long-term rent my house, but my experiences was with short-term rentals on an island that some of you may be familiar with. That's the Isle of Palms. It's a small banana-shaped island off Charleston. My sister lived there for many years, decades, and in that time, she saw the small houses that were built after World War II for veterans be turned into, be bought up by off-island entities for the most part, and turned into, well, they were torn down, and they were built, in their place were built 5 or 6 bedroom houses, massive mansions. And the result of all of that was short-term rentals exploded. The money went mostly to people off-island, but even worse, and this is really what moves me to speak altogether on these 2 issues, is that the local housing stock disappeared. The housing for teachers, firemen, nurses, policemen disappeared. And it just went away. Now, we don't want that to happen here. We can't afford to lose our nurses, firemen, teachers, and policemen. And the main difference between us and Isle of Palms is that Isle of Palms has a bridge. And we don't have a bridge, right? I mean, if people leave because they can't afford housing because it's been bought up by an investor, mostly an off-island investor, then we are all the worse for that. We need to support our local housing, and in order to continue to make it at least remotely affordable, Although we allow people to short-term rent, and that's reasonable, it shouldn't be handed over to people who do it for nothing more than a business. I also wanted to say with regard to our freedom to do whatever we want with zoning, you know, we have zoning so that we don't have people living next to garages who do automotive repair at all times of the night. So I think zoning is a restriction on our freedoms that we all accept. And there's nothing wrong with accepting those limitations. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman here at the front.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Herlihy, 6 Salty Way, Quinnet. I have several comments. One, I understand the discussion on delinking. We've rented for 23 years here, our place out in Quinnet, and I'm comfortable with delinking. However, the second piece of going to the definition, I think it's important. We've had some positive and negative comments on that in this discussion. But if you look at the scale of that, there are about somewhere under 2,000, I think it's closer to 1,750 dwellings on the island that have been short-term rented over a 4-year period that would qualify for the suggestion of qualification of Matt's rental. That leaves 8,000 to 9,000 dwellings on the island that would have to have the smaller rental contract limit of four per high season versus 9 per high season. It also may have other applications which I'm not concerned of. Although we would qualify in either case, personally, I think it's unfair to people in that 9,000 dwellings that they may have need to do, to go to short-term renting to solve medical problems, college problems, things of that nature. This is an asset, and they need to be able to use it in that regard. Lastly, we do have rental regulation authority in the existing thing, and I think if someone were to take away my permit, if we had excessive noise or traffic problems repeatedly, et cetera, it would probably push me to put a big rental deposit in and really come down on people. So I think we do have mechanisms there. I can understand the concern, especially in more crowded neighborhoods than we enjoy out in Quinnet. So when you get closer to town, we've had some discussions with people. Lastly, I just want to say there's been a ton of effort put in this by a lot of people in the short-term rental group and all the boards, and I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Dye?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Penny Dye, and I would like to speak very strongly against this amendment. This takes away property rights in the future. We have hundreds of houses here that are pre-1970 that don't have and never will have certificates of occupancy. It's unfair. I support what Bobby DaCosta said. Lastly, I want to say that the short-term rental work group not only did a lot of work, they looked at data, they tried to define what the real problem is. They brought a set of articles to the town that the two members of the select board then modified heavily. The FinCom, in their wisdom, when they made their recommendation, put it back to what it was supposed to be. I urge you to defeat this amendment and vote the article as recommended by the FinCom. I have a question. I'm not sure who can answer this. Perhaps you can, Madam Moderator. Is there any way to de-link these two articles completely and vote on them independently, or is that out of the scope?
Okay, so we can de-link 1 from 2, which is what Mr. Fee is proposing, but we cannot de-link 2 from 1.
Which means that we cannot...
It means that if 1 is adopted, we can adopt 2. If 1 is not adopted, then we can't adopt, well, we can adopt 2, but it won't take effect.
Okay. I just think it's patently unfair for people to take away the rights in this sweeping manner. I urge you to vote this amendment down. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Madam Moderator, it's Ron Bamber. I've lived here 53 years, and here's basically what it boils down to. When whaling was out 160 years ago, the only thing that saved Nantucket was people could rent rooms in their houses. They could rent their little cottages for people to come here. The poor people, when I first came 80 years ago, I'll be 86 shortly, I stayed down on Fair Street, Mrs. Cathcart's property. We rented a room for a week, my parents did with my sister. And later on, when I was married and came out here, I stayed at Mrs. Kodalak's down where Great Point Properties is and rented there. What it boils down to is you should always have the right to do what you want. When people get older, you know what it costs to go in the island home? For 2 people, it would be $30,000 a month, $15,000 something apiece. That's $360,000. I know myself that the house that I live in, I'd probably have to rent it because it would cost a year 300 and some thousand today to have people come in to help you out instead of going into the island home. The island home is $15,000 a person. That's $30,000 a month, $360,000 a year. So people should have their rights, like Bob DeCosta said. If you have to rent your house, and I would, even though I live at 28 Washington Road on the water, in order to survive and have people come in to take care of my wife and I would have to rent that house in order to pay what it costs today, approximately $325,000 to have people round the clock. That's what my friend had recently, Bernie Bartlett, and it's expensive. So to take away your rights to rent your own house is ridiculous. And as far as short-term rentals for cottages, that's how everybody survived years ago. People rented rooms like Mrs. Sherlin even. I didn't know her till later from Carl Sherlin. She was a wonderful person. You could go there and rent rooms. So nobody should take away the rights that you can't rent your own property because everybody is going to have to do it when they have to go into the island home or have someone come in and watch them at their own house, which is a better thing. They'd have to rent their own house out like I would in the summer in order to pay for it, so I could stay there even.
Thank you.
So don't be fooled by what they're saying. I'm telling you right now.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Is this on? Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm 86, and you just scared the hell out of me. But, I'm a Herschel Allerhand and I have a question for the lawyer for our town. It would be simple. Could we just pass an amendment saying that nothing done by rules here affects anyone that is entitled to vote at this meeting? So anyone who lives in this island, no, seriously, anyone that lives on this island should be entitled to do whatever they want up to one home. Is it legal to make that kind of a separation?
No, I think that's unconstitutional, isn't it? Yeah, there's some clause of the Constitution that would put the kibosh on that.
What is the clause?
For what it's worth, I agree with the moderator.
Thank you.
There's the Commerce Clause, there's the Equal Protection Clause, and there's the Substantive Due Process Clause. All of those would be implicated if we tried to pass an amendment as you suggest.
Well, then how do we have separate tax rates?
Madam Moderator, so I think,
yes,
I think the speaker is talking about the residential tax exemption, correct? That's on the books of the Commonwealth. It's up to the selectmen adopted that at some point, and far be it from me to say that, I mean, I think that's beyond certainly the authority of what the town can do, because there is a state statute that permits that.
Thank you. Ms. Moore.
Madam Moderator, a point of order, really. Is there a way to separate the two questions in Mr. Fee's motion?
Yes, in fact, Mr. Fee has agreed. I just didn't get a chance to say that.
Okay. Do you, okay.
So Mr. Fee has agreed that we can, I guess, essentially bifurcate his motion, his amendment, into 2 separate motions. One, to change the language at the beginning to de-link Article 1 from Article 2, and the second would be the change in subsection H that's up on the screen right now. Okay, Ms. Moore.
So if I might further clarify?
Yes.
For the audience. So what we would be doing is we would be deciding, A, whether or not to delink Article 1 from Article 2, meaning that we could pass the general bylaw, whether or not the zoning bylaw change passes. So it would put into effect a set of regulations that would allow us to be better informed about how this market works, how people use their short-term rentals, and therefore provide us the information we need to amend going forward to mitigate the potential negative impacts of the short-term rental industry on Nantucket. So that would be passing the general bylaw separate from the zoning bylaw, delinking them. And then the second piece would be, should we start there and then we can go to the second one?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Because we're going to keep the discussion as one, because we started out that way.
And then the second vote would be whether or not to accept the Finance Committee's amendment of the Select Board's original warrant article. And the distinction between those two is how you define the property owners who are protected from the new bylaw going into effect on their property. And the distinction would be whether or not you have a certificate of occupancy as of today is the FinCom's motion. And to Ms. Dye's point, anyone who doesn't have a CO because it's a historic property would be restricted from the 9 contracts. They would be under 4 contracts. Now, it's possible to make an exception to that and amend the bylaw. But that's the distinction, is you would have to have a certificate of occupancy on file effective today in order to retain the right to vote to have 9 contracts in the summer, in July and August. The Select Board's original language was intended to protect those property owners who are already short-term renting, and that was in respect of the value that the short-term rental work group brought to the Select Board, which was to do no harm to existing homeowners who have needed to short-term rent in order to make ends meet or to make the finances of their property work. It didn't contemplate future needs of property owners, and that really is the distinction. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to vote on the delinking so that we can address Article 1 separate from Article 2. It would still be the case that if Article 2 passes and Article 1 passes, Article 2 doesn't go into effect. And then the other one would be this question of who is protected to 9 contracts a season under the FinCom's language and the Select Board's language. I hope that is helpful.
Thank you. The gentleman up in the back? It's on.
Is it on? Oh,
Yep.
There we go. Jeff Booms, 14 Woodland Drive. We don't currently rent. I like the suggestion was if you could have residents be able to rent for 90 days a year and non-residents 60. I'm hearing that's not legal. I do have concerns down the road for all the people that haven't been renting if they do need to rent. People that are renting now, it's just maybe the phase of their life, but there's other people that aren't renting that maybe they will need to. And wondering if, all this, well, if you've done this before, you can do this later. If there's just a number that can be agreed on to limit short-term rentals to 60 days a year, which would promote people renting longer term. So I'm wondering if there, instead of having all this, well, if you've rented before, if you haven't, it would take into account who's rented already. If there's a number, maybe 60 days a year that you could short-term rent, and outside of that, people are long-term renting. We've seen over the last 20 years how there's a lot of people will rent, they're short-term renting, and then they don't rent their house in the wintertime for a teacher or a carpenter or so forth. And people aren't buying a house to use it themselves because it's being short-term rented. So limiting it to a number is equal. It's fair for people in the past. It's fair for people in the future. I don't know exactly what that number is. Maybe it's allowing everybody to rent short-term for 60 days. That's fair for everybody, and that would promote people doing long-term rentals and doing winter rentals. And that would kind of, what, H and M would kind of get pulled together then? I think there's M and an H. You know, any personal legal entity, it has this line, who's done, if you can do 9 changes and 4 changes. It makes it very straightforward for the Board of Health, being 60 days. I'm not sure how that would word, but that would be very straightforward and fair for everybody.
Okay. Thank you. I think
Thank you.
your time has come. Ms. Benz?
Yes, excuse me very much. I would just like to thank Mrs. Moore for bringing us back to the amendment. I think that the whole purpose is to be able to vote on this amendment and then get to the nitty-gritty of Article 1 and Article 2. But I would like to point out the Select Board voted in favor of its version, and it passed. They are elected. The Finance Committee is not.
Thank you. Mr. Lowell?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Andy Lowell. On the amendment, I'd like to speak on the article as well, if you'd reset the clock for that. But there's just too many loopholes in this. I don't see how it can be enforced. What stops somebody or 4 families coming together, signing one contract so that on paper it looks like there is, just a 1-month contract, yet there's 4 people involved in renting in a timeshare fashion. So I'd love to have an answer on that. And can I speak on the article after?
At another time. We're
Thank
just
you.
doing the amendment right now. Okay. On the amendment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Halen Gardner. I disagree with this amendment. I don't think, I love Matt's sandwiches. He's no friend of SDR owners, and I happen to be one. So it's a no for me. They should be linked.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. Mr. DaCosta?
I kind of pride myself on knowing what we're doing, but I have no clue what we're voting on right now.
Okay, well, we haven't voted yet.
I know, but we're splitting. What the hell are we splitting?
Okay, here's what we're doing. Mr. Fee has made a motion to amend. His motion to amend has 2 pieces. The first piece is to strike this language, which would delink Article 1 from Article 2. We're going to vote on that piece of his amendment separately.
First or second?
First.
Okay.
Then.
So let me get this straight now.
Yeah.
We're going to vote on whether the 2 are tied together.
Right.
If this passes, the amendment passes, and 1 doesn't pass, 2 can pass, or 2 can pass, but 1 can't pass?
Okay, so here's how that works. So if 1 passes, then 2 can or cannot pass, whatever we decide. If 1 does not pass, 2 can be adopted, but it won't go into effect because 2 is a link to 1. But what Mr. Fee is saying is that if 2 doesn't pass and 1 does, then 1 stands. So we can adopt 1 without 2, but we can't adopt 2 without 1.
So that's the first thing we're voting on.
That's the first thing we're voting on.
And then are we going to go back to debate the other part of it, which is the 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 9 rentals, 4 contracts?
No, we're debating Mr. Fee's amendment as a whole. And so the second part of his amendment is to change Section H by striking the language that's shown as stricken and putting back in the language that's added here and shown in yellow that was in the original Select Board article.
Okay, so just so I'm clear.
Okay, so wait, let me finish though. So we'll vote on the first part of Mr. Fee's amendment, and then we'll vote on the second part of Mr. Fee's amendment, And depending upon what passes and what doesn't, we'll then go to a discussion of Article 1 as a whole, either as amended by Mr. Fee or as not amended by Mr. Fee, whatever ends up happening.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the first part is to separate the two articles, correct?
That's correct.
The second part is to decide whether if I had rented my house in the past, I could rent up to 9 times in July and August. But if I have no rental history, I can only rent 4 times. Is that correct? So I'm being penalized by the Second Amendment if I never rented my house.
Correct. As long as you have a certificate of occupancy.
Well, I couldn't get my final loan from the bank without my certificate of occupancy, so I don't think that's as big a deal unless it's an historic house. I don't think there's too many houses floating around this island, although Matt says he's got 3. I don't know how the hell he did that, but I'm sure the building inspector would like to have a chat with you about that, Matt.
Okay. So, any questions on procedure before I go up to Mr. Kopko? Okay, Mr. Kopko.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Question, and I think this goes to voting on the first part of Mr. Fee's amendment. Is it possible for Article 2 to be amended so that it is delinked from Article 1?
Unfortunately, no. Because,
Or fortunately, thank you, Madam Moderator.
okay, yeah, I don't know. I don't have an opinion actually, but I've been asked and the answer is no. Ms. Sutton.
So to get back to the confusing part, the second portion of this, it was my understanding that it's a matter of definition in H, that you would change the certificate of occupancy, which the FinCom says you would have to have in order to short-term rent. And Mr. Fee has stated that there are a number of properties, I can think of some myself, that do not have certificate of occupancies. And I'm just trying to understand this.
I just want to mention to you, you see that people are skipping over that parenthetical language, as applicable as determined by the building commissioner. I would look to Mr. Giorgio, but I believe that what that's intended to address is the historic homes that don't have certificates of occupancy because they were built prior to the time when certificates of occupancy would issue. So the building commissioner would make that determination. Is that correct? And the planning board is prepared to make an amendment to clarify that.
So an amendment to the amendment of the amendment?
No.
Is that where we are?
Are we going to amend the amendment or are we going to do the?
So I just
We're going to
wanted
do
to
it
clarify
afterwards.
the difference between what is being proposed in the Second Amendment, which has to do with who is eligible for short-term renting under the Massachusetts general laws.
Right.
And Matt's says that if you can submit a proof of state registration to the Board of Health for your rental, and that you have, as the owner, you can prove that you've collected and paid your rooms and excise taxes. So in other words, you've been renting legally, you would continue to be able to short-term rent versus the FinComs, who is essentially depending upon the certificate of occupancy and the approval of the building commissioner. Is that where we are?
That's where we are.
Super, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Curnow?
Point of clarification through you to Ms. Campbell. You would have had to rent in the third quarter in the last 4 years and pay taxes. So you may have rented it 10 years ago. You will still then only be able to rent for 4 turnovers. So it had to be in the last 4 years as well. So it's not just that you did it one time at some point, just to be clear. That's the amendment that Matt's put forward.
Right. Ms. Moore, I'll come back to you. I want to go to Mr. Iverson because he's been at the mic for a bit. Oh, no? You're deferring? Okay, Ms. Moore, go ahead.
So just to be triply clear, It is not about whether you can or cannot short-term rent. It is whether or not you are eligible to short-term rent 9 contracts in July and August or 4 contracts. This is not a prohibition on short-term renting in the summer, and there's no restriction on the shoulder seasons and the rest of the year. So I'm a little worried about what Ms. Campbell said. The implication was that you couldn't short-term rent. It's just the number of contracts you would be eligible to have, whether you are protected and allowed to do 9 or whether you're under the new bylaw of 4.
Okay, Mr.
And there, oh, and excuse me, may I?
Yeah.
And also there is a provision in here for a hardship waiver. So if your circumstances change, you would be able to bring an appeal under your special circumstances. And that was built in here specifically for cases where people's life circumstances changed and they needed to rent more than the 4 contracts. They have the option to appeal for an exception.
Mr. Iverson?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. David Iverson, Chair of the Planning Board, member of the Short-Term Rental Work Group, as well as the Affordable Housing Trust. I'm speaking for myself, but I just wanted to give a little insight to the reason the Planning Board sent this suggestion to the FinCom to begin with. It was our feeling at the Planning Board that it is the town's stance that short-term rentals are a legal use of your home. If we take away any portion of that use, whether you've exercised that in the past or you have never exercised it, it is still a right that you contain when you own your property. And if we take away that right, our concern was that litigation could happen against us, and a judge could find that those properties that we have not let to rent, that it previously had that right, would be found to be pre-existing non-conforming. And if that happened, we would lose our ability to regulate them in an effective way, and they would be able to continue that use in perpetuity until they abandon it for 2 years or more. So our reason for suggesting this without the 3 years or the third quarter proof or renting within the past 4 years was not only to protect the town from litigation, but to be fair to homeowners. It is your right whether you exercise it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Welch?
Good evening, Madam Moderator. Stephen Welch, year-round resident, and speaking my own as an individual, no affiliations in my comments tonight. At first, I'd just like to get a clarification. I understand that we're talking about splitting the amendment during the vote. One part will be linking, retainage the linkage, or delinking. The second part is what I'd like a clarification on, please. Am I to understand that the text in yellow, regardless of the strike-through, is Matt's amendment to be incorporated, or is the strike-through meant to not be included in Matt's amendment?
Okay, the strike-through is something that Matt's amendment is taking out. So he is crossing out what's crossed out there, and then he's adding in the other language. Everything in yellow is what he's doing. So he's striking that language, owned a property and the structures thereon have been issued a certificate of occupancy as applicable as determined by the building commissioner, is being stricken. And then the rest of the language that's shown in yellow is all being added.
Okay.
So that it's basically going back to the way Article 1 appears in the warrant starting on page 1.
And, okay, and then the Finance Committee's motion reflects the certificate of occupancy being included?
Yes, so the Finance Committee's motion would not have any of the added language in yellow, and the stricken language would come back in.
Okay, thank you.
And then the Planning Board is going to make if Mr. Fee's amendment doesn't pass, then the Planning Board is going to make an amendment to clarify that language in the Finance Committee motion as to what it means to have a certificate of occupancy with a historic home.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So on the amendment itself, not the delinkage, but the text in front of us, I personally would not support the second section. I do believe that it restricts rights in a way that is unnecessary at this point. We can always come back and revisit this particular text once we do a pilot, once we do some restrictions through the regulation scheme that's been presented if it's passed. This restricts rights, I think, unnecessarily. It won't, if that second portion of the amendment were not included, we still would be able to, through this registration scheme, still be able to collect and analyze data, make important informed decisions at a future meeting, and we could do so without unnecessarily restricting rights, without having a clear understanding of the ramifications of those restrictions. Thank you, and I will speak on the main article once we get to the meat and potatoes, and as you know, I have an amendment maybe to do some clarification cleanup. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Atherton?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Rick Atherton. I've tried to pay reasonably close attention to the whole short-term rental discussion. I think this evening we have a good discussion. Lots of questions, points of view, concerns have been raised, many of which never quite got a hearing before the short-term rental work group or the select board. I find having to figure out what I'm going to end up voting on is mind-boggling. You may all have it down. Mr. DaCosta may have it all figured out now, but I don't. I've got to take 7 pages in the original motion, 7 pages in Mr. Fee's amendment, and now we have amendments, and I think we're going to have more amendments as we go through the process. I think we would all benefit, I have to say vote no, but to get this back to the select board without some other work group impeding, pull all these questions together that are beneficial to our community and bring something back that reflects a good discussion about the concerns that everybody has raised here. Now, I don't know how to do that except by voting no on all of these. And then hopefully the select board will step up and I think do the job they should have done in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on Mr. Fee's amendment, I think we're ready for a vote. So I want to be super clear about what we're going to vote on. So our first vote is going to be whether to amend the Finance Committee motion by striking the language that's shown on the screen, provided that the provisions of the amendments to Chapter 123 proposed under this article shall not take effect until and unless Chapter 139 zoning of the Town Code regulating short-term rental use is adopted at the November 7, 2023 special town meeting in substantially the form set forth in the Planning Board motion under Article 2 of the warrant and is approved by the Attorney General. That would effectively de-link Article 1 from Article 2, which means that Article 1, if it passes, stands alone regardless of what happens to Article 2. So that's what we're voting on. Does anyone have any question about that? Okay, so a yes vote would adopt Mr. Fee's amendment and strike that language. A no vote would defeat Mr. Fee's amendment, and that language would stay in, linking Article 1 to Article 2. And voting is open. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Voting is closed. Okay. On the first part of Mr. Fee's amendment, delinking, yes, 518, no, 456. That amendment is adopted. Okay. Now, we're going to vote on the second part of Mr. Fee's amendment. That amendment would strike the language that's shown here as stricken. Owned a property and the structures thereon have been issued a certificate of occupancy as applicable as determined by the building commissioner, receives a certificate of registration by the building commissioner. That's stricken. And then the other language in yellow, receives a certificate of registration to operate a short-term rental from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 64G, Section 6, is added, as is the language, and who, 1, submits proof of the state registration to the Board of Health, and 2, submits proof that the owner has collected and paid the room's excise tax required for short-term rentals under General Laws, Chapter 64G, in at least one calendar third quarter between January 1, 2019 and November 7, 2023. So a yes vote will adopt that amendment. A no vote will defeat that amendment. It's 1 for yes, 2 for no, and the voting is open. Okay, on that part of Mr. Fee's amendment, it's yes 353, no 614. That is not adopted. Okay, so now, just so we're clear, what we're voting on and what we're discussing is Article 1 as moved by the Finance Committee with the language at the beginning linking Article 1 to Article 2 stricken. So now I'm going to recognize Mr. Iverson, is it, from the Planning Board to amend the Planning Board's motion? Is that the idea? Yeah, to amend the Finance Committee motion. Okay. Do you have that? No, forget Kirshner's thing. That's fine. That's fine. We're typing.
Madam Moderator,
Yes.
bear with me. I'd like to make a motion to address the pre-1973 buildings, that the CO should be addressed, 1975 should be addressed by the building commissioner, and I'm not sure how to, John Giorgio will
Okay.
support the
Yes,
language.
he's written something, I believe, that we're going to show. So that is going to be an amendment to subsection H, I believe, yes. See, this is where we're making the sausage. We forget, but we are the legislative body of the town, so this is what happens. Is that it? Okay. So the suggestion for fixing that certificate of occupancy issue for pre-1975 historic homes is to add, in place of what was there, unless a certificate of occupancy was not required for a dwelling unit prior to the adoption of the state building code as determined by the building commissioner. Yeah. Okay, is that your motion, Mr. Iverson?
Madam Chair. Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion about this amendment? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Christy White. Just a point of clarification on that. So if a commercial entity bought a property that is not able to get a CO because it's historic, does that mean that they would be exempt? It's a question.
Yes, Mr. Iverson?
New commercial entities will not get if this passes, will not be permitted to rent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes.
I have a question about the last part. Why did that come off? Who submits proof to the state registration and paid the excise tax and did?
Because that was what was in the select board's motion that we just did not approve. So now we're back to what the finance committee had. And let me tell you exactly where in the warrant that is so you can see.
I thought that language in the bottom half of the screen was in both of them.
No.
Article 1 and the finance.
So
if that's the case, what is the constraint? What do you have to do to prove that you've been renting your house before? So anybody...
If you had a certificate of occupancy prior to November 7, 2023, or it's determined you didn't require a certificate of occupancy because your house was built prior to circa 1975, then you're exempt.
So that, doesn't that mess up with what somebody said over here about why you put this in here?
Mr. Giorgio?
Madam Moderator, so this language up on the screen, the proposed amendment that's on the floor, is really just a clarification of what the planning board had recommended to the finance committee. It is still the same concept that if you have a certificate of occupancy as of tonight, then you're legally protected. We've just added language that takes into consideration those historic homes pre-1975 when a CO was not required.
Right, okay. But the stuff that's now stricken, are we going to talk about that later when we talk about Article 1?
The second motion that Mr. Fee made to amend was to restore that language that you're talking about, but that motion to amend was defeated.
Okay, so it seems to me that it kind of eviscerated the idea that people that have to at least prove that they have been have been doing short-term rentals in order to get the protection. Now they have to show nothing to get the protection, it seems like.
Now they have to show a certificate of occupancy or show they were exempt from that requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Fee.
Yeah, here, just unintended consequences. I think the woman up here before was onto something. If we approve this amendment, every single, pre-70 house downtown is going to be a target for this. I grew up on Center Street, and a lot of those houses have been gutted and turned into that, but there's still a few that haven't. And I think every single one, the unintended consequences of doing this is every single old building that doesn't have a CO is now allowed. So I would urge us not to accept this, and if we do accept this, I would urge people to vote against 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes.
I'm just standing because I think in the parentheses, certificate and occupancy should be capitalized.
Oh, okay. Thank you. These things matter. Okay, so we're going to vote on Mr. Iverson's amendment, which is to add the language in yellow in place of the language that's currently there, which is as applicable as determined by the building commissioner. We would have instead, unless a certificate of occupancy was not required for a dwelling unit prior to the adoption of the state building code as determined by the building commissioner. A yes vote will adopt that amendment. A no vote will defeat that amendment. Voting is open, 1 for yes, 2 for no. Okay, on that amendment, yes 408, no 528. That amendment is not adopted. And we should go back to the language which was there, which I will read to you, Mary, because I know you don't have it. In the parentheses after certificate of occupancy, it should say, as applicable, as determined by the building commissioner, end parentheses. Okay, so we're now back to Article 1, as printed in the warrant, as amended by Mr. Fee to strike the linkage language at the beginning. Okay. Mr. Kopko.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The first vote I took this evening involved whether I was going to be willing to change my mind based on things that I heard in the meeting. And I voted yes, because I think we've had a meaningful discussion of this issue this evening, and I appreciate that from everybody. The two fundamental issues I think that we mean to address here are, one, how do we protect the tradition of year-round residents and seasonal residents to rent their homes to vacationers? And there's a way to do that through regulation, simple regulation, and make it fair for everyone, and make sure everyone's rights to do that are protected. And the second is, how do we prevent our residential neighborhoods from becoming commercialized by the purchase of these homes by corporations who are in the business and who are operating them at an arm's length, so that if there are issues, we know that property owners traditionally, whether they're seasonal or year-round, are closer to their properties, they pay more attention, they take better care, whereas corporate entities are unlikely to. I was disappointed that Article 1, as brought forward, essentially grandfathered in the existing corporate-owned residential STRs that are in residential neighborhoods, thereby sort of rewarding those corporations who have started to create this problem for us by allowing them to keep doing this in perpetuity while preventing others to do so. So I think at the end of the day, I think this article as written is too onerous and Byzantine on property owners and doesn't do enough to eliminate the possibility of corporate ownership. So I urge you to vote this down, and obviously Article 2 down. And let's come back with something really simple. There are lots of towns in this Commonwealth that have written one-page, 3-paragraph bylaws doing exactly what I just outlined. So let's give ourselves a chance to do that, something that even Rick Atherton can understand at town meeting, and we can vote for with confidence. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Mr. Sulzer.
Thank you. Jim Sulzer, a former member of the Short-Term Rental Work Group. I'd like to give a bit more background on Article 1. I know all those pages can be confusing, but it's actually, I think, a lot simpler than all those pages would suggest. Although thank you to Mr. Giorgio for turning it into legally defensible language. Okay, as I said before, I'm going to go into more detail on this. The regulations in Article 1 are a direct reflection of the values, which were pretty simple, that guided our short-term rental work group. Those values include protect the time-honored tradition of home rentals on Nantucket, very important. Avoid adverse impacts on the local economy stemming from a loss of existing short-term rental revenue, important. Prohibit additional corporate ownership and discourage investment-only ownership of residential properties as STR, and reduce the neighborhood churn caused by numerous turnovers of occupancy. Now, how have we done that? I think we have. The regulations in Article 1 acknowledge and honor home rental rights through what is called protection, and we just voted to broaden that definition of protection. Owners whose property is protected, which is now homes owned as of today, can rent an STR 9 times during the high season of July and August, as opposed to only 4 times for non-protected property, which will be newer STRs. Now, there are some other things that go with that, but that's basic. On the other side, setting reasonable limits and trying to stop corporate STRs, Article 1 bans new corporate STRs moving forward. We did not feel legally we could ban the corporate STRs that are here now. We didn't have a legal leg to stand on that, but it is less than 4% of all STRs. So let's keep that in mind, and let's realize that it will not grow. Also, we're discouraging investor-only STRs, those big STRs that many of us don't want. Maybe they're not owned by a corporation, but they're taking over neighborhoods and maybe gutting neighborhoods. We think because they could only rent 4 times, new ones only rent 4 times in high season, that will discourage them from coming forward. So, and of course, there's no limits in shoulder season. So we're protecting home rental rights. We're forbidding corporate STRs moving forward. We're helping us to control our future through Article 1, both our rights and our limits. It's very important that we pass Article 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Iverson?
David Iverson, Planning Board Chair, previous member of the Short-Term Rental Work Group. Speaking for myself here, I want to take my 2 minutes to quickly go through what a yes vote means and a no vote means. There seems to be a lot of less than factual information floating around. So I just wanted to start with a yes on 1 would give you sensible rules and regulations that manage STRs now and in the future. A yes vote on number 2 will insert STRs as an approved use in every zoning district. With that thought, those STRs cannot be STRs until they comply with all of the regulations in 1. So the thought that 2 is going to create unlimited STRs all over the island simply is not true. They must comply with all the regulations in Article 1. A no vote means nothing changes. On 1, a no vote means we will have far less regulations to regulate this business. If you vote no on 2, again, things remain the same. And what that means is that people can have as many STRs as they want. Corporations can still own STRs. STR-only houses will still be available to be owned by anyone who wishes to own them. So in other words, what I'm saying is, if you vote no, the STR business on this island will continue to grow. Voting no will not stop that. What will stop that, or at least slow it down, is voting yes on 1 and 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Benz?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. First, I want to say that I live in my house, and it's my home, and I will never rent it. My comments are based solely upon a career I've had implementing and administering large, complex governmental programs. Having monitored the dialogue surrounding short-term rentals for several years, I'm afraid that I have to come down on the side of voting no on Articles 1 and 2 now, for 3 simple and straightforward reasons. I agree with Mr. Kopko for one. But my first one is, after 1.5 years, the town has been unable to implement a short-term rental registration program. Well, it has become almost automatic to blame a contractor for this failure. We have to accept that the town's first efforts have been unsuccessful, and we have no assurance that the next contractor will be any better. 2, it is our responsibility as voters, as the moderator pointed out, or someone did, to remain vigilant and make sure that the town demonstrates to us that it can get the registration system in place, certainly before any further burdens fall upon its resources. In the absence of that, it is almost impossible to envision that the town can accomplish the difficult implementation of Articles 1's extraordinarily confusing and complex rules and simultaneously perform their rigorous enforcement. Until that can be demonstrated, Article 1, while having some very good concepts, becomes nothing more than a meaningless piece of paper, and Article 2 becomes virtually out of the question for now, strips as it would be of its guardrails. 3, if at some point the town does demonstrate to us, the voters, that it can get a registration program in place and manage and enforce it successfully, these articles can be refreshed and brought back to ATM for consideration. We need to know the outcome of that challenge before we can move to the next step. Until that time, both of these articles, regrettably, even after all the work that has gone into them, are unarguably premature. Please join me in voting no on 1 and 2 now, and give the town the time it needs to get the registration program up and running smoothly. With that accomplished, further consideration is appropriate for the future management of short-term rentals on Nantucket.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, up at that back mic.
Hi. Lisbeth Carol Fuller. And I just want to say to Matt Fee, he's my brother-in-law, but I will say we disagree about things, but I usually trust his opinion because he digs into all the facts. And I think when people are saying Matt Fee wants to take away your property rights, no. Matt doesn't want to take anything from you. He's just recognizing there's something we need to do. And as we discuss this issue, I think it's important to remember that if we are intent on preserving our individual property rights, we can fall into the trap set by the corporate we in their concerted effort to conflate corporate greed with individual interests. Greed is really difficult to legislate against. And as we step up to the mic, who's speaking up for the lands and the water of Nantucket that are getting abused each and every day? Who is speaking up for the lands that are getting developed left, right, and center? Like the tipping point, we're past it. And if we don't do something, we're going to lose the reason we're all here is because of Nantucket. So I would say that if we're all talking about everyone's investment, everyone's in property rights, How about that we're devaluing the soul and the land of Nantucket by what we do? So we're going to have to figure out a compromise for Nantucket. So instead of fighting about, I want to keep all my rights, well, what about Nantucket? It's lost it. It's lost its rights. So we can all fight about it, and then we're going to end up with a polluted harbor, which we have. Go look at the black algae on the beaches, with traffic that you can't even drive anywhere, with all the craziness that's been going on here over the last few years. So that's all I want to say, is let's remember Nantucket and not be so greedy about our own little personal interests. Thanks.
Thank you. The man up in the back, please don't do that.
Madam Moderator, JP Hernandez, might need your help on this. I've seen it done before. The action of making a motion to call the question, is that something we can do now?
Oh, yes, you can call the question, and if you do that.
I'd like to do that.
Okay, so the motion to move the question, let me explain what that means. That means a yes, it takes a 2/3 vote. It's not debatable. If it's adopted, then we'll go immediately to a vote on Article 1. If it's not adopted, then we'll go back and continue our discussion of Article 1. Does anyone have any questions about the motion to move the question? So if you're ready to move to a vote on Article 1, you would vote yes to move the question. If you want to continue to have the discussion and further debate, you would vote no on the motion to move the question. It does require a 2/3 vote. It's yes, 1 for yes, 2 for no, and voting is open. Voting is now closed. So on the motion to move the question, yes, 849. No, 84. That motion is adopted. Okay. So that means that we are going to go immediately to a vote on Article 1. Let me be very clear what you're voting on. You're voting on the Finance Committee's motion as printed in the warrant, as amended by Mr. Fee, by striking the language in the first paragraph that linked Article 1 to Article 2. It's otherwise the Finance Committee's motion as printed in the warrant. It requires a majority vote. A yes vote will adopt that motion. A no vote will defeat it. And it's 1 for yes, 2 for no. Voting is open. Okay, so on that motion, yes, 431, no, 523. Article 1 is not adopted. Okay, so now we're going to go to Article 2, because Article 2 is inextricably linked to Article 1. I'm going to recognize the chair of the Finance Committee for the purpose of making, what?
Article 2 is a zoning article.
Right, Planning Board, didn't I say?
You said Finance Committee.
Oh, sorry, I'm wrong.
Happy to do it for.
No, I'm going to recognize Mr. Iverson as chair of the Planning Board for the purpose of making a motion to take no action on Article 2.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Okay, no questions, right? Everybody knows what they're doing as they race to the parking lot. So, a yes vote will adopt the motion to take no action. A no vote will defeat that motion. It requires a majority vote. 1 for yes, 2 for no. That voting is now open. Once we've done this, we're going to go on to Article 4. Okay, that's yes 562, no 266. That motion to take no action is adopted. Yes. I can't hear you. You've got to go to a microphone. Where no one got up and said anything. I looked around, there was. Okay, well, there was nothing we could do. We couldn't act on Article 2 anyway, because it was linked to Article 1. We took no action. So we passed over, I mean, it's gone, it's dead. We took no action on Article 2. Okay. Article 4. Article 4, pages 15 and 16. Finance Committee motion is as printed on page 16. I'd ask for your consent to waive the reading of that. Recognize Ms. Cronau for the purpose of making that motion. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Ms. Lepre, I think you called this, and this requires a 2/3 vote.
I have a question and maybe an amendment. I'm just wondering why it is saying that the town may not revoke its acceptance of this act for at least 3 fiscal years or to take any other action relative thereto. Why can't we make it just, why does it have to be 3 years?
Yes, Mr. Giorgio?
To the previous speaker, that's the statutory requirement. Once you adopt a special purpose stabilization fund under state law, you cannot rescind that for 3 fiscal years.
So this is money that's supposed to go to affordable housing, but haven't we given I don't know, over $70 million to affordable housing in the last few years? Can anyone answer that? Is that?
Mr. Turbot, do you want to answer that? Or Ms. Moore?
So the answer to your question is yes, but we have a $500 million housing problem. So, and this is a new revenue stream. It's not taxpayer funded, it's short-term rental funded. So it's an additional fee attached to short-term rentals for people who own multiple properties.
I guess I feel like there's a lot of things in this town that could use money, and we're giving all of it to housing. So I feel like there may be, and I live in a covenant house. I appreciate this, but I also think we have given a lot of money, and it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of feedback necessarily. And I know this has been brought up a lot at the last town meeting. I just thought that this is money that maybe could be used for more than just one thing. I get that it's an issue. I work at the school. I see it all the time. I'm not saying it's not an issue. I think that there's a lot of concerns, or I guess, could we get a report of could there be an amendment in there where we get a report every year of how this money was used? Like, we bought X number of houses, or I guess that's information.
Madam Moderator?
Yes.
So when this short-term rental community impact fee goes into a stabilization fund, it can only be expended by vote of town meeting. And so you'll see each year into the future, when money is being appropriated out of this fund, it will be a vote at town meeting. No, the 3-year limitation is you can't change the percentage or the purpose of the special purpose stabilization fund, and you can't revoke acceptance. It's a 3-year statute, and I think a limit, and I think that's because the Department of Revenue doesn't want to be inundated with every year these funds being changed by town meeting. That's one issue. So the 3 years has nothing to do with the fact that whenever you want to use money in that fund, it must come to town meeting, and it must be a 2/3 vote to appropriate the money.
I just want to make one announcement. If you're going out in the lobby, please use your inside voices, because the people in the gym are having an issue. Ms. Benz?
Oh, yes, thank you. I'd like to ask Mrs. Moore about her comment that we have a $500 million problem, and is she expecting us to underwrite that?
Ms. Moore?
I will say that the shortage of affordable housing on Nantucket is extreme. The cost of creating housing units is growing. It is a massive problem. The number of $500 million is not defined, or it's how I think about it in my head. It's how we talk about it in the affordable housing circles. It is, we all know it is the number one priority. It is the underlying cause of many of our problems on Nantucket. Employees, town employees, retaining employees. It is our number one priority, and it is my belief that we should allocate as many resources as we can make available to addressing this problem. And there have been numerous reports from the housing director at select board meetings on how the funds that have been allocated to date have been spent. And Affordable Housing Trust meetings are available on YouTube as well for people to learn more. There have been reports on how the money's been spent.
Thank you. Yes, also at that microphone.
Galen Gardner, I'd just like to know, with this particular fund, if you can just lower that screen a little bit.
Can you
Could you?
lower the screen just a little bit so they can see more? Is that what you want to see?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. That's the whole thing.
So who is paying this? Because as an STR owner, I already pay lots of taxes. So now, am I going to be paying extra? Who is paying this? Because somebody needs to pay for all the housing, which I did support. However, if you're going to make it impossible for me to run a business, I don't know where you're going to get the money.
Mr. Giorgio, do you want to answer that?
Madam Moderator, so this is Article 4. Article 3, the town voted to adopt a 3% community impact fee just on short-term rentals. And so that money has to be paid to the Department of Revenue in addition to the rooms tax. And then the Department of Revenue will remit that community impact fee to the town. And in this Article 4, if it is approved, that 3% will go into this special purpose stabilization fund. But we already voted in you already voted in Article 3 to assess that 3% community impact fee. Yeah, I'm sorry, that only applies to professionally managed units. It does not apply to owner-occupied units.
So what's a professionally managed unit defined as?
Thank you.
Madam?
Yes, Madam Moderator.
Yep.
It is defined in state law, and it is one of two or more short-term rental units that are located in the same city or town, operated by the same operator, and are not located within a single-family, two-family, or three-family dwelling that includes the operator's primary residence.
Okay, that's not so clear for me. I'll have to sit down and dissect it.
Yeah, the language is in Article 3 if you want to take a closer look at it. Mr. Holland?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Tucker Holland, Housing Director. I just wanted to address one area around the $500 million comment. I mean, I agree with Ms. Benz that solving our problem should not be all on the taxpayer. The taxpayers, the voters here, have been extremely supportive of efforts to address the issue. And with what the voters have done here previously, we have allocated over $70 million to date, with the $6.5 million approved last spring. Those monies can be further bonded with at no additional cost, if you will, to the taxpayer. That could get us, in round numbers, $150 million of the way towards that $500 million problem. The thing that can be the game changer to get us most of the rest of the way is the transfer fee that town meeting has on 5 different occasions voted to support and would be levied only on high dollar transactions. In what the governor has just proposed in the Affordable Homes Act, the administration included this transfer fee, which we and many other communities have been seeking for years. And if it ultimately is approved as the governor has proposed it, it would only apply on transactions, if they were to happen today on Nantucket, over $3 million. So we have a way to get there. We need to continue to show our support for the transfer fee. And I'm appreciative of town meeting for all that they've done up until this point. Thank you.
Thank you. So anything further on Article 4? Okay, this requires a 2/3 vote.
Excuse me.
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't see you, Ms. Sutton. Go ahead.
That's okay. I can see you're in the shining lights there, moderator. So I just have a question on this because I understand that, as Tucker has stated and Ms. Moore has also stated, understand the needs in the housing area. However, my feeling is that these short-term rentals and the increased numbers of people that are here year-round, but let's say mostly in the summer and often in short-term rentals, is infrastructure. You know, our bike paths are very important for many of the people that visit the island, and if we're trying to encourage more bicycling, well, or electric bikes, 100% of the 3% fee going to purely affordable housing seems to me to leave other areas that are in need, that are used by people that are here for short-term rentals in, you know, out in the dark there, waiting for taxpayers to cover it. And I just was wondering if there's a way to do 60-40 or, you know, to give some relief and some help to the areas that are used by the people that come here for the summer. So that was my question and my wonder. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Hill-Holgate?
I'm kind of surprised because 3 went through without even a question, but I think the idea here was to tie it to sort of specifically one of the bigger issues, which is the professionally managed, more business-like forms of short-term rentals, and the tie that it has an impact on the affordable housing stock on the island. However, if you don't want to tie it to that, just vote it down. The revenue is still going to come in, and it will go in the general fund, and it will be appropriated through the budget every year, and you will vote for that. So it's the choice. I mean, it could be amended to be a different percentage as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on Article 4, a yes vote will adopt the motion, a no vote will defeat the motion. It does require a 2/3 vote. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Voting is now open. Uh-oh, this requires math. Can you guys do the 2/3? 354, 254. No, right? $354, yes. I think it's 405. Sorry, we're just doing a little math here. I'll let you do the math along with us. So on the motion on Article 4, yes, 354, no, 254. 2/3, I believe, is 406. So I believe that Article 4 is not adopted, but I'm waiting for math confirmation because my skills are... Okay, so no, it was not adopted. Right? 405, 405, 406, something like that. Okay, so not adopted on Article 4. Okay, so we're going to go now to Article 7. Article 7 starts on page 18. The motion of the Finance Committee starts on page 19. There was a technical amendment that was read in at the beginning to strike what had been paragraph B, renumber what was C to B. And I'm going to recognize Ms. Cronau as Chair of the Finance Committee for the purpose of making that motion. Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, that motion is made and seconded. Mr. Glidden.
Yes, Madam.
There you are. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would be remiss in letting a town meeting go by without my lovely word. I like to hear dirt being talked about by my good friend Nat Lowell. And I wanted to note this article because it speaks to something very important in my heart, which is rugged road. And that's a rugged road if you've ever driven down it. It's a bit bumpy. And I would hope that in this article, you would support me in striking rugged road from it as an amendment. I think it's very important to protect our water right next to our well there. We have the Boy Scout camp there. It's a very rural area. And we also have the Nantucket Lighthouse School on Rugged Road. Now it is officially half rugged, but I think that section that is rugged is very important in maintaining that rural feel of that street, and it is not important for Rugged Road to be enhanced, because why would you enhance Rugged Road? Thank you.
So wait, don't go away. So your motion is, you're making a motion to amend to strike Rugged Road. Is that right?
That's correct, Madam Moderator.
Is there a second to that? Okay. On Mr. Glidden's amendment only, does anyone want to speak to Rugged Road? Yes. Can you got to come down and get to the, sorry.
You're absolutely right. I should have known. I apologize. Lee Saperstein, there's a reference to a plan, and it might help us as voters to see the plan, because it was my understanding that Rugged Road was included so as to be able to deal with drainage where it intersected Lover's Lane. If that's the case, I think that we should deny the amendment.
Okay. So no yelling back and forth. Does anyone from the town want to talk about? No. Yes, Ms. Gibson, go ahead.
We have to evaluate this. We can't eliminate this road if it's part of a planned water extension project and have a potential gap. I mean, it would have been good if this had come up before tonight and we could have evaluated it. So I would say, please vote no on this. It's part of a large project.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, my name is Spencer Goldsmith. I live on White Street, and my property abuts Lover's Lane. And so for several years, we've been following very closely the plans that the town has made to pave Lover's Lane and to improve the transportation to and from the airport. And for the most part, over that time, it's been several years, the town's been very transparent in sharing those plans. In fact, the most recent community outreach was last December, at which the project manager shared with us their road plans. There was not one mention of an easement or a taking at that meeting. We learned of the easements with this article, when this article was made public. Now, we went to the town hall, and they were very, very helpful in explaining what is happening. But the problem I see, and why I can't support this, is because there's been virtually no outreach and no explanation to the community, let alone the abutters. So I'm going to vote against this until I can learn more about what the purpose of these easements are, and has there been due consideration given to the property owners and abutters? Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. First of all, at Rugged Road, it is only the intersection with Rugged at Lover's Lane, and we already have permission from the property owners whose property will be affected there. With regard to other easements for this project, this is a combined project of transportation improvements and water extension. The easements that will be necessary to complete the project include temporary easements, permanent utility easements, permanent sightline easements, drainage easements, and permanent roadway easements. We have not been in contact with people yet because the plans are continuing to be developed, and we need to determine exactly the specifics of the properties that will be needed. And appraisals will have to be done because that is the process. And if there are damage awards, they will go through the process. This project will not be able to proceed without the easements. We hope that they will be voluntary and we will not need to use eminent domain authority to take them, but in the event that we do not receive voluntary easements, then if we want the project to proceed, we will have to take the property. Easements only.
Thank you. Go ahead up there let me go to this woman on the right here, and then I'll go to you, Ms. Sutton.
Meg Glidden, not as tall as Tobias. It feels very scary to go up against Ms. Gibson and the town. But just the whole idea of paving Lover's Lane, and all the other roads are now going to be a part of this. We can do takings here. We can make easements. And I know this is a very specific thing that's happening, but it seems like the town is always paying for improvements, for water, for sewer, which just lets developers increase density in all of these more and more rural areas. What used to be quiet neighborhoods are now speedways for cars. So I recommend and feel strongly that we should vote this down. Let the developers pay for their own way. Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Sutton, are you talking on Mr. Glidden's amendment or on the article as a whole?
I had a question on the article.
Okay, well, let's do Mr. Glidden's amendment first, which is to strike Rugged Road from the main motion on Article 7. That required, were you speaking of the amendment?
I got to say something.
Okay,
in a while.
Mr. Lowell, go ahead.
I'm all over the current. They can't help themselves. They love that stuff. Listen, folks, this is just legal language stuff that's been going on for years. How do you think these bike paths get built? There's all kinds of easements, takings. It's not a taking like they took your house. They're just taking some dirt in the front, whatever they're doing to put the utilities in. Every road layout is different, okay? Rugged Road's not getting paved, just so you know. Please don't think that. That's not part of the vote for these roads out there in the Bronze subdivision, whatever we want to call those roads. Those were all private, by the way. Thank you that we finally got Boulevard taken. That took about 15 years, maybe longer. And there's going to be a beautiful bike path to get you to the beach, okay? That's an 80-foot layout boulevard. Lover's Lane is a county road from, I think, in the late 1800s. That research was done like 6 or 7 years ago when this whole project started. The people out there all know what's going on in Lover's Lane. But as Libby is talking about, all the legal stuff with utilities is very complicated. That's one of the reasons we have telephone poles in the middle of our sidewalks, because it ain't easy to move them, okay? So please strike this amendment down and vote for this, because this project needs to happen. It's already been approved, but this is the technical stuff that has to happen. Unfortunately, it is confusing. Not as bad as Article 1 confusing, but it's still confusing. But it isn't a taking. This isn't any backroom deal stuff. This is just to get the actual project to happen. Thank you very much for all being here still. Don't cut me off so fast.
Thank you. So on Mr. Glidden's amendment, Mr. Gasparo?
If I could be recognized, please, Madam Chair. I would like to speak on the amendment. My name's Arthur Gasparo. I'm the chairman of the Traffic Safety Work Group. I'm not speaking on behalf of the work group. I would just like to convey to the meeting that we had several meetings at the work group level talking about the alignment of that intersection. It's not all of Rugged Road. It's really to help the entrance to the Scout Camp and to Rugged Road as it exists align properly for safety reasons and sightline reasons. So I hope that you would not strike that from the article. And I also hope that you would support the article. I think that it's not being done for the benefit of developers, it's being done for the benefit of our community. We've all seen what's happened on Old South Road, the traffic, and unfortunately with, part of growth, there also sometimes needs to be infrastructure improvements, and that's exactly what this is. So I would hope that the amendment would be struck down and the article could be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. So are you on Mr. Glidden's amendment?
Unfortunately, Madam Moderator.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Stephen Welch. I actually chair the Capital Program Committee. I'm speaking to you in that capacity. This project has been reviewed by Capital Program, which consists of 7 members of the community, year-round residents who put a lot of time into reviewing details. It is part of a larger project that town meeting has approved and voted and appropriated funds for, with work having begun. It does involve water service. I'm not going to get into whether or not it helps to remediate potentially PFAS contamination. I think that with respect to the particular area of Rugged Road, unless a map were brought up and a carve-out was made as opposed to simply removing Rugged Road, I would ask that you please vote no on the amendment. And I would ask that someone would perhaps articulate for people who don't commonly get involved with this type of work what an easement typically looks like. This is, and I'll comment briefly, I've got 57 seconds, I hope to use 10 of them. An easement in these types of installations typically represents within 10 feet, not always, but within 10 feet of the public right-of-way or the private way. These aren't going through someone's front yard up to their garage, requiring the removal of a garage or along those lines. So I think it's important to perhaps understand that aspect of it. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Okay, yes. Just on the Mr. Glidden's amendment, please.
Well, I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments that were made. First of all, the easement, as I'm aware of it now, is taking 20 feet, not 10 feet. And I happen to have a well that is fairly close to that intersection. And with regards to the backroom deals, it wouldn't feel that way if the town just communicated the intention or the plans around the easement. It's probably something very innocuous, but haven't heard from it. So I would vote no for it.
Okay. All right, so on the amendment, oh, yes, go ahead, Mr. Lenhart.
Chuck Lenhart. I'm the chairman of the Campers Association, and we're the direct abutter of this. We own this quarter. We're very aware of this project. We've had discussions with the town for a couple of years about this project and what's going on there. It is just improvements for water management to stop all the soil from Rugged Road running down onto the bike path that would cross at that point and the intersection. Simply that. And I would recommend that you do not vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on the amendment, requires a majority vote. Yes, we'll adopt Mr. Glidden's amendment to strike Rugged Road from the motion on Article 7. 2 will be a no, and will reject the amendment. The voting is about to be open, is now open. 1 for yes, 2 for no on Mr. Glidden's amendment. Voting is now closed. When we're done with, well, I guess when we're done with this amendment. So on Mr. Glidden's amendment, yes, 77, no, 414. That amendment is not adopted. Now we're on the Finance Committee's motion on Article 7, which is as printed in the warrant with the technical correction that I read in at the beginning, striking subsection B and re-lettering subsection C to B. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom Sidlowski. I'm the president of the Surfside Association. We've been working for years and years to get these roads worked on, and I appreciate Spencer's issues, and I hope that the town will do the best they can with the abutters, but we really hope that people will vote for this article. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no one else, we can go to a vote on the main motion on Article 7 with that technical amendment read in at the beginning. A yes vote will adopt the motion. A no vote will defeat the motion. It requires a majority vote. 1 for yes, 2 for no, and voting is open. Okay, we have 2 articles left, I believe. Articles 19 and 20. Okay. On the main motion on Article 7, yes, 423, no, 74. That motion is adopted. Okay, Article 19. That is on page 28 of the warrant. The Finance Committee motion is there with a note about the Select Board acting as the sewer commissioner and their vote. Their positive vote means that the main motion on Article 19 requires a majority vote. And the motion is as printed in the warrant. I'm going to ask for your consent to waive the reading and recognize Ms. Cronau for the purpose of making that motion. Thank you. Is there a second? Okay. Ms. Lepre.
I got my questions answered.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any more questions.
Excellent. Happy. I'm happy. So does anyone have anything they want to say about this article to add this property on Sankaty Road to the sewer district?
Madam Moderator, I just have a question.
Okay, Ms. Sutton, go ahead.
Campbell Sutton. So these are just two properties on Sankaty Road, and I'm just wondering why it's just the two?
I'm assuming that Ms. Williams, who was the sponsor of the article, had someone who wanted the sewer to come to that. I would suspect you may see other people as it goes down the road, but is that correct, Ms. Williams? It's surrounded by sewer district, and the people wanted to add their property to the sewer district.
Okay, is this property already developed or looking to be developed?
Has structures on it.
Structures on it? Huh. Like a barn?
I don't know. Ms. Williams, do you want to? No, she does not wish to speak. I have no idea what's on there. But the select board did take it up and had a conversation, and they decided it met the criteria. So.
Okay, so one parcel is developed and the other parcel is undeveloped, correct? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Amy Eldridge, 56 Sankaty Road. 62 does not have any dwellings on it. 64 has a garage and a main house. My concern is that, as you can see, I live at the very top of Eldridge Lane, and the bike path for Pulpus comes right out next to my driveway. If we allow sewer at 62, my big concern is that that hallway lot could be subdivided and 3 properties could be on there with 12 cars potentially coming out of a driveway that literally is right where the bike path exits out onto Sankaty Road. There's an NRTA bus stop there and a crosswalk, and it's hard enough for me getting in and out of my own driveway without having, bikers speeding off the bike path and people crossing over in front of my house at 56 to get on the bike path before the designated crosswalk and crossing section. So I have severe concerns about putting sewer in there because what it's going to open up in the future and do to that stretch. Now, if the bike path wasn't there, maybe it wouldn't be an issue. But with that bike path there, we're going to see some horrible accidents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. On the main motion on Article 19, a yes vote will adopt the motion. It's as printed in the warrant. A no vote will defeat that motion. Voting is open, 1 for yes, 2 for no. Voting is now closed. Okay, on the motion, yes, 147, no, 284. That motion is not adopted. Okay. Article 20 on page 29 is also a motion. I do just want to mention that this original article was filed by Carl Borchert, who unfortunately passed away unexpectedly. Very sad. He was a member of the planning board at times and had done a lot for the town, and I'm really saddened by his passing. I don't know if anyone is here to step into his place to speak to this if that's necessary. But the Finance Committee motion is as printed in the warrant. Again, it did go before the Select Board acting as the sewer commissioners. They voted to add the parcels. The motion is as made in the warrant, and I'll recognize Ms. Curnow for the purpose of making that motion.
So moved, Madam
Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. This was called by Campbell Sutton.
Hi, thank you, Madam Moderator. So I'm in complete agreement with this. I just had a question, and it sort of links to the previous one. I believe that this is being done because this is an environmentally sensitive area, which, great, support the sewer piece. However, I think there needs to be a way in the future to de-link, a favorite word tonight, to de-link build-out from sewer placement. If you have an environmentally sensitive area that ends up getting the sewer, and let's say you only had a 3-bedroom cottage on your property because that's what was allowed with your septic and the size of your property, et cetera, and you get on the sewer, you're now able to build out your property to have a primary, secondary, tertiary. I understand the ground cover things and the bedroom restrictions, et cetera. However, let's say you go up to 8 bedrooms. Now you have more use in an environmentally sensitive area than you had in an unsewered situation. And I'm a little concerned that what's being done for good reasons, good, strong environmental reasons, is being negated, thank you, negated by the build-out the subsequent build-out on the properties. And I think we need to do something about that. And that's why I sort of called this article, because it really starts to talk to that piece that I think it's very important that as a town and a community that we really start to look at how the sewer is, and the placement of sewer is affecting the sense of community and the build-out and added pollution to the property. So I'm in support of this. I just wanted to be able to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. For the record, I live at number 11. I've lived there for over 40 years, and Carl and I, last summer, decided to bring this to town meeting, and sadly, he's not here, standing where I am. It's for environmental reasons was one of the main reasons we both felt strongly about this, and I'll keep it very brief. I would just ask your support for this, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So on the motion, it does require a majority vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion. A no vote will defeat the motion. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Voting is now open. Okay, on the motion, yes, 310, no, 99. That motion is adopted. So I'm going to recognize the chair of the Board of Selectmen, Ms. Hill-Holgate, for a final motion. I do want to say we have some thank yous going up on the screen. So much goes into this meeting and all the articles, all the work groups, all the boards, commissions. It takes a lot of work. So thank you to all the people who were involved in this. And Ms. Holgate, your motion would be to dissolve the November 7, 2023 special town meeting? Is there a second? All right, I think we can do this by a voice vote. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Because you can come up here and do it. Thank you very much.